Hey, what's up? John Sonmez from simpleprogrammer.com. So I got a question about when to learn a second programming language. I thought this was an interesting question because this is something that a lot of people encounter, especially if they're new developers and they've learned their first programming language, and now they say, well, at what point should I advance my skills and try to take on a second programming language? So here's the question here. It's from Paul, and he says, how do I know if I'm skilled enough to move on to learning a second programming language? And he says, I'm still learning Python and I've gotten decent at it. So here's the thing. There's no reason to learn a second programming language unless you need to use it or you're planning on utilizing that second programming language, right? So if you can do your job and you can still advance and you don't feel stifled or stuck, there's no need to learn a second programming language. So what you shouldn't be doing is you shouldn't be saying, okay, well, let me learn Python, and then once I feel like I've learned Python enough, I'm going to learn a second programming language. Now, don't get me wrong here. I don't think there's anything wrong with learning multiple programming languages. I think it's a great idea. I think that as you learn multiple programming languages, you're going to see things from a different paradigm or from different paradigms, and that's going to enhance your overall ability as a programmer as you see different ways to do things, and you see what's idiomatic in one language and what's idiomatic in another language, and that influences how you think about the overall picture of software development. But with that said, too many beginners are trying to acquire what I call the Batman tool belt of knowledge. And the problem with that is that you acquire all these gadgets that you think that you're going to utilize, but you never end up utilizing them, so you end up wasting a lot of time. And today you can't get away with that. And the reason why is because technology changes so fast, right? Everything is changing so rapidly. You're having to learn new programming languages, JavaScript, frameworks, all of this stuff that's happening all the time. So you can't waste your time learning things that you're not actually going to use or that you don't need. If you learn your first programming language, okay, and you're moving along and you say, gee, I would really be able to expand, I've sort of hit this plateau, and I would really be able to expand my abilities if I learned a second programming language so I could look at things a little bit from a bigger picture. I only know how to do things in this one way, and I'd like to see things from a bigger picture. Then that's totally fine. And you could decide this early on, right? I mean, you don't have to become a master in a programming language. I would suggest that you become at least an intermediate level, right? That you actually have done well, that you can do most programming in your first programming language before taking on a second one. Although, a decent argument could be made to say that you could learn multiple programming languages at the same time, and that would enhance your overall ability to learn how to program. Some college programs actually do that, which is kind of interesting. But here's the thing. So I kind of sidetracked here, but what I'm trying to say is essentially what you want to do is, if you're going to learn a second programming language, is at least have something that you're going to utilize it for and a reason for learning it. Otherwise, you're not actually going to learn it. It's not actually going to stick. It's not actually going to benefit you. I always tell you, right, if you've been watching this channel, that you learn so that you can do. I want to learn X so I can do Y. You always have to have that. If you don't have Y, you shouldn't be learning X, okay? Just learning for the sake of learning is not usually beneficial. Now, the only exception to that is acquiring general knowledge or base knowledge, or sort of things that especially knowledge that you can acquire in downtime that doesn't cost you anything. For example, listening to a bunch of audiobooks all the time while you're running or driving in your car makes a lot of sense. The more practical they are, obviously the better, but just acquiring that kind of knowledge and feeding your brain can be useful. But for programming, for trying to advance your career, for trying to advance your technical knowledge, that stuff doesn't work. Learning a programming language, never using it, is not going to benefit you much. It might give you a slight paradigm shift, but in 2 to 3 years, you're going to forget all about it. You're not going to use it. It's not going to have any kind of benefit. So at the very least, you should look for some kind of project that you're going to do in this new programming language and make it something that maybe is going to have a secondary purpose. Maybe it's actually going to be some kind of tool that you're going to use for yourself. Maybe it's going to be a tool that you're going to use for work. Maybe it's going to be a side project that could actually generate you some money or build a business out of that, right? Or maybe you find another job where you use that programming language, or you do some freelancing where you're going to have some kind of benefit where you actually need to learn the language, right? In order to have some value, some lasting value from that thing. Because again, a lot of people try and learn stuff. They try to acquire this tool belt, especially a lot of beginning programmers, because they think they need to know all this stuff. They need to check off all these boxes so they know all this stuff, and now they're a good programmer. And what ends up happening is they end up wasting a lot of time learning stuff that's not useful, right? There's broad kind of knowledge things, right? There's a lot of things that you can learn in the technology field that will be widely applicable, or that will have cross-cutting concerns, or that will cross over into other realms. But there's also very deep specific knowledge that is not beneficial, not extremely beneficial outside of its own realm. And programming languages, for the most part, tend to fall into that, right? I mean, like I said, again, there's a paradigm shift. There's different ways of, when you learn multiple programming languages, it does carry over and increase your overall knowledge and ability. But in general, it's specific knowledge. And that specific knowledge is not going to be so useful, right, if you don't actually use it. So all I'm saying here is this. It's basically like, if you're going to learn a second programming language, it's not a matter of how much you mastered the first. It's not a matter of timing, right? You should have at least an intermediate level of the first programming language. You don't want to, for the most part, you don't want to try to learn multiple ones at a time. That's going to be quite difficult. But what's really important is that you just figure out the why. Why are you learning this programming language? You know, the why could be because you want to expand your knowledge, you've hit a plateau, but you still need the why of what you're going to build. You need to know, what is it that I want to learn X so I can do Y, and you got to figure out what is that why, right? I'm using two different whys here, like a variable why and the why you should do it. So that's a little confusing, but I hope you're following what I'm saying here. One other thing I would say about this, I'm going to give a quick plug for, if you're trying to do this, if you're trying to learn a second programming language, if you're trying to learn anything quickly, one thing that you might want to invest in before you invest in actually learning a second programming language is to learn how to learn faster. You can check out my course. I put together a course called 10 Steps to Learn Anything Quickly. You can check it out there. And that course is all about teaching you how to learn programming languages, how to learn anything, not just programming languages. I added actually a bonus module that talks about how to learn programming languages lately, but I use this, right? I use this technique. I developed this technique to learn. I probably learned in about 3 years, I learned probably like 6 or 7 programming languages and taught classes on them, taught actual video courses on Pluralsight. You can check out all my Pluralsight courses here, and you can see that I'm not kidding. I'm not making this up. I learned the Dart programming language in a matter of weeks, and then taught a course, recorded and taught a course on that. Go, Lua. I'd have to think about it. There are a bunch of other ones that are in there. You can check them out, as well as frameworks and all that stuff. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. It's definitely a sticky question. You know, there's some good books like Learn 7 Languages in 7 Weeks. That's probably the exception to this rule, where you're kind of dabbling and you're just kind of taking an introductory view of a bunch of different programming languages and playing around with them just to broaden your perspective. That would be fine. But as far as like in-depth learning of a programming language, the advice I gave you in this video is what I'm sticking by. You don't have to agree. In fact, if you don't, leave a comment below. I'm always curious to hear other people's opinions. If you like this video, if you want to get more videos like this one, if you want to see me flex, click the subscribe button below. I don't know why, if you click the subscribe button, I'll flex for you. But if you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and click that, and I will talk to you next time. Take care.